sites. Okay, we're looking now at looping, or thinking iteratively, as the IB call it. The first one that we need to know about is the for loop, and this is when you repeat something a fixed number of times. So we're pretty sure, reasonably sure, that it's going to repeat a certain number of times. We use this loop. For example, I want to count from 0 to 9. I say for, and this inside brackets I have a condition which tells Java how many times this is going to repeat and when it's going to stop. So I'm going to go through that condition now. If you look up here, the first one before the first semicolon, that's the initialization, which you should know by now, initializing a variable. So you're declaring an int I and you're initializing it to 0. Okay, so after the first semicolon, there's the condition. So this is the condition at which the loop will, while it will still continue. So the loop will still continue while I is still less than 10. Great. And then we've got the increment. So each time you go through the loop and repeat it, what happens? And I said I is going to be equal to I plus 1. I increase I. So in other words, I is going to start off at 0. This loop is going to continue while I is less than 10. And every time it goes around the loop, I is going to increase by 1. So in other words, this will go from 0 to 9. The body will repeat 9 times, 0 to 9, that should be 10 times. I'm just going to edit that while we're here. It will repeat 10 times. 1 second, there we go. Because the first time will be time 0 and the last time will be time number 9. There we go. Okay, so you can have a for within a for. For example, if you had an outer one that repeats 10 times, an inner one which repeats 20 times, then whatever code you put in the center here would repeat 200 times, 10 times, and for each of the 10 times it repeats 20 times, so 200 times. Programmers try to avoid nested loops, but in some situations it's quite handy. Another type of loop for when you're not sure when something is going to end or how many times you're going to repeat it is a while loop. Now a while loop evaluates a condition before it begins. So in other words, before you begin your code, which you would put inside here, it asks, are lives greater than 0? And if lives are greater than 0, then it will do this code, and it will continue to do this code until lives are equal to 0 or less. If I get halfway through whatever long statements or long pieces of code I put here, and lives variable changes, it won't automatically stop. It'll continue to go down the loop, and it'll only reevaluate it when it jumps back up to the start. So every time it begins this loop, it'll reevaluate. Is lives greater than 0? Ah, it's not. Okay, I won't do this then. I'll come down here. There's a slight variation on this type of loop, which is called a do-while loop. Now the difference is that the do-while loop will always happen at least once. So whatever code you put inside here will always happen at least once, because if you think about it logically, it goes through here, it does all of this, and then it only checks and evaluates whether it should repeat it at the very end after it's done it. Okay, so that means that it will always do it once, but it may not do it more than once, and you don't know how many times. It'll continue to repeat it until, in this case, lives is greater than 0. Along with loops, there are two interesting words that you can use, break and continue. For example, I have a loop here, and if something is true, I'm going to break. So I think that I'm going to count up to 10,000. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen, or reasonably sure it's going to happen. So I'm going to put, from 0 to 10,000, I'm going to use a for loop. But inside there, if a certain condition is met, I'm going to break. I'm going to jump out of that loop. So for example, if I find my secret number, I'm counting from 0 to 10,000. If my number is equal to my secret number, I break. In other words, I stop there. I jump out until here. So that's handy in a situation where you want to cover a complete range, but on a certain circumstance or certain thing is true, you want to stop. You would use a break there. And I guess the opposite of that would be a continue. In this situation here, imagine I've got a huge program in the middle. I'm going to I'm going to count from 0 to 10,000 again, and I'm going to print out each of these numbers. But if the variable I is equal to ignore this number, I'm going to continue. And what that means is it doesn't go down here, it jumps back up and starts the next iteration of the loop. So normally it goes like this, round and round and round, but whenever I is equal to my number, it hits continue and it just goes back up here without printing, without doing the print.